Phillip Rivers going against the Seattle Seahawks vaunted defense in the year 2025 of our Lord. Could it actually happen? We're going to be breaking it all down here on a crossover Thursday edition, Locked On Seahawks, Locked On Colts.
You are Locked On NFL Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Greeting 12s and Colts fans. We've got a thrilling crossover Thursday episode here on the Locked On Podcast Network coming your way. I'm Corbin Smith from Locked On Seahawks. He's Zach Hicks, Locked On Colts. And this was certainly a game that was circled before the season started. And even in the middle of the season, it was circled for different reasons when Indianapolis looked like one of the best teams in the AFC. A lot of things have changed in between that time period and now. So we're going to be taking a close look at Indianapolis's quarterback conundrum that has reached a historic precipice this week. We're going to look at some key matchups. We've got keys to victory and predictions all coming your way here, courtesy of our friends at PrizePicks. Download the PrizePicks app today and use the code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. All right, Zach, I'm just going to get straight to the point here because this is my 7th season with Locked On, and I don't know that I have ever had a crazier storyline to dive into in a crossover episode. And there's been some crazy ones. Don't get me wrong. The NFL knows how to have narratives out there. But I just had to be straight up asking you, like, is this really happening? Is Phillip Rivers at 44 years of age? Looks like he's had a few chicken wings since his last snap in the NFL. Is Phillip Rivers starting this game on Sunday for the Indianapolis Colts after Daniel Jones goes down for the season? Are we seeing Phillip Rivers going up against Seattle's defense in the rainy weather at Lumen Field on Sunday?
Well, Corbin, I will start off by saying if this is the craziest storyline, then you haven't done enough crossovers with the Colts over the last couple of years. You're not getting the Jeff Saturday hiring, the ESPN analyst who had no right being a coach being brought in here, or maybe the star quarterback retiring right before the 2019 season. Just do more crossovers with Colts, and I think you'll get a lot of crazy storylines. But to answer your question, it looks like it's trending that way. The Colts have not committed fully yet. Phillip Rivers hasn't committed fully yet. We don't have that like insider report saying that he's definitely starting on Sunday. But the fact that Riley Leonard did practice in full today, he is dealing with a PCL injury, but he practiced in full, and the Colts still didn't commit to the young rookie 6th-round pick being the starter. They kept saying, we'll see. And apparently Rivers took more of like in the warm-up sessions, he was like the first guy to go, and then it went to Leonard, and then it went to Rippon. It does appear to point to Phillip Rivers getting out there on Sunday. And heck, when you're 44 years old and you've been retired for 5 years and now you're resetting your Hall of Fame clock right now, you're not doing that to come in here and be a backup. You know, he's coming out here to start on Sunday. So, yeah, we will be seeing old man Phillip Rivers out here, 44. We called him Uncle Phil back in 2020. When we had him. Now we're changing it to Grandpa Phil, I think, here in Indy, because he is a grandpa as well. So, 44-year-old Grandpa Phil, older than the head coach in Indy, older than the offensive coordinator. He will likely be the Colts starter on Sunday. I almost guarantee it for the Colts.
Yeah, you make a really good point there, Zach. And if I'm just thinking about it from like Marshawn Lynch's perspective. Marshawn came out of retirement to play for the Seahawks in the playoffs. Now, a little different. He was only like 35 then. Even by running back standards, that's like a 44-year-old playing back there. But I'm thinking about that scenario there. Marshawn Lynch isn't coming into play or suit up if he isn't going to be playing. Like, especially in the case of Phillip Rivers, who is right now is a semifinalist for the Hall of Fame. So I don't think this has ever happened. I don't know that a guy has been this close to getting into Canton and then just decided, you know what, I'm willing to wait 5 years. And I don't know. I have to check Pro Football Reference. I don't know if they have a game started by grandfather statistic just yet, but they might have to add that now with Phillip Rivers. I don't know that I've ever heard of such a thing, an NFL player. Maybe there was a kicker that lasted into his mid to late 40s that
George Blanda was in his 50s. George Blanda was in his 50s.
George Blanda might have had great grandkids when he was done playing.
Brett Favre, I think, was a grandfather when his last couple of years. But besides that, there's probably not many grandfathers who played in the NFL.
So maybe PFF or Pro Football Reference has that. But look, I'm just going to anything can happen on Sundays, and I have a ton of respect for Phillip Rivers, and I agree with everybody that has said he is in that Mount Rushmore for competitors. So if there is a guy, Mike McDonald said this on Wednesday, if there is a guy who can pull this off, who can be in retirement for 5 years, come back clearly, I mean, at least from my viewpoint, does not look like he is anywhere close to peak condition. But this is not, his game has never been predicated on movement. He was a statue in the prime of his career. His game's always been about getting the ball out quick, being accurate, talking smack without cursing. Like, that's always been his game. So he's always kind of had the old man quarterback game. That's kind of been his style. So if there's a guy that can do it, it's Phillip Rivers. But I look at what he is drawing for his first game back. If indeed he is starting in this game, or even if he's on the sidelines and they start Riley Leonard, and then early in the game, you know what? This ain't working. Let's put Phillip Rivers in. Your first test, you get to play a Seahawks defense that has given up 9 total points the last 2 weeks. They have been swarming running backs. They've been swarming quarterbacks. They aren't giving big plays up downfield very often. This defense just did something that hadn't been done by the Seahawks since the Legion of Boom in 2014, when they were in their peak, that arguably best defense in NFL history. At least they're in the discussion there. This Seahawks defense is playing at that level right now. They are rushing like madmen. They are creating turnovers like crazy now. They are getting healthier in the secondary. Look, that is the worst of the worst draw. If you're a guy that hasn't started a game in a couple of years, let alone 5 years, a 44-year-old quarterback that already has movement limitations going against Mike McDonald, I wouldn't be shocked if this is a game. They haven't blitzed very much, but I would not be shocked if this is a game. If that's who's starting, that Seattle says, okay, Devin Witherspoon, Ernest Jones, Nick Emanwari, we're gonna make this grandpa see if he can move at all. I would not be shocked if that's what the Seahawks do, and they really try to pound him early and see if the old man can handle it, because I know I'd be doing that if I was the defensive play caller.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because the way I always operate when it comes to blitzing versus not blitzing with quarterbacks is if you have more the mobile guy who you want to contain to the pocket and you want to just get that ball out of his hand because he's not a quick decision maker, you want to blitz them, right? Because when you blitz, it's not always to get sacks. You're kind of blitzing to hurry up the process, make them have mistakes. With Phillip Rivers, he might be a quarterback that you probably, I don't know if you want, like maybe you want to do the feeling out early in the game, but I don't know how much you want to blitz him because that ball might be out in 1.8 seconds regardless. If you bring 10 guys, if you bring one guy, that ball might be out. And kind of the way that you go against quarterbacks like that, at least in my opinion, is drop as many bodies into coverage because that ball is going to come out quick. You might as well just have more hands out there. But I do think there will be that feeling out process early for both sides because you just have no clue what to expect. You can't look at the film from 5 years ago and say this is what Phillip Rivers is going to be because he might be completely different, might be worse. It might be, look, I'm not trying to say he's Tom Brady or anything, but Tom Brady's arm somehow got better every single year in his 40s. So maybe he found the TB12 method and was doing whatever Tom Brady was doing to get his arm stronger. We have no clue what we're going to see on Sunday. We can guess what we're going to see, but it's anyone's guess. There's no film to look at, which is killing me as the film nerd over here in Indy. But it's going to be a fascinating thing to look. I understand why the Colts did it because, look, at the end of the day, unless you stumbled across Brock Purdy in the 6th round, which I don't think they did with Riley Leonard, you're not going to have a day 3 rookie quarterback that's going to be ready to go, especially in this environment against Seattle's defense, where with Phillip Rivers, you get the ultimate competitor. You get an accurate quarterback. I think Phillip Rivers till the day he dies could probably throw an accurate ball under 10 yards. It's just how he's always been his entire life. Now, can he do anything more than that? I don't know, but that still might be better than the 6th round rookie quarterback against a defense. But it's on the Seahawks to just suffocate those underneath routes, stop the run, which they have been just so good at doing this entire season, and force those turnovers that they've been doing as well. So I think we know how this is probably going to go on Sunday, but at least with Phillip Rivers compared to like Leonard or Rippon out there is this like tiny modicum of just like, who knows? We'll see, I guess, because like it's still Phillip Rivers, but even though he's almost 50, like it's still Phillip Rivers. So I understand it from the Colts perspective, even if it's, very unlikely to be successful, it's probably still better chance than Riley Leonard getting a win on Sunday.
And the Colts might have seen what the Seahawks did to Max Brosmer 2 weeks ago, who, look, he was undrafted, but very similar in terms of grades. With Riley Leonard, Brosmer could have been picked in the 6th or 7th round, and Seattle just shoot him up and spin him out. So the Colts might be looking at that like, look, we'd rather put an old man in there that has seen everything and hope that there's still a few cannons in there for him to throw and see what happens. And I guess it's hope that they have going into this game. When we come back here at Crossover Thursday, I promise that we're probably done talking about Phillip Rivers for the most part, but at the same time, look, this is crazy news. So we're going to get to our key matchups to watch when the Seahawks and the Colts duke it out. And there might be a few guys back on the field for these two teams respectively as well, sprinkled into that. We'll get into the matchups coming up next here on our Crossover Thursday edition, Locked On Podcast Network. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. You and I make decisions every day, but on PrizePicks, being right can get you paid. Don't miss any of the excitement of this sports season, whether you're following the NFL, NBA, or both. There's no better time to jump in on the action. If you haven't tried it yet, PrizePicks is the simplest way to play. Just pick more or less on at least 2 player stats, and if you get them right, you win. It takes less than 60 seconds to make your lineup, and you can play anywhere PrizePicks operates, including California, Texas, and Georgia. PrizePicks has added an extra layer of excitement to the holiday sports schedule. You can create a lineup in less than a minute, and the app makes the whole process smooth and intuitive. You can choose from a huge range of unique stats, fantasy scores, field goals, attempted, free throws made, turnovers, whatever fits your strategy. Download the PrizePicks app today and use the code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's the code LOCKEDONNFL for $50 in lineups after your first $5 play. PrizePicks, it's good to be right. Welcome back to Crossover Thursday, Locked On Seahawks, Locked On Colts. I'm Corbin Smith, host of the Locked On Seahawks podcast. He's Zach Hicks, host of the Locked On Colts podcast. We've got a big game coming up on Sunday. The Colts, they basically are on the brink of elimination with the way things have played out as of late, and the fact that the Texans and the Jaguars have been so hot in the division as well. That certainly has not helped their situation. The Seahawks at 10-3, they are tied for the best record in the NFC West and the NFC with the Rams. So they are in the mix to win their division and get that number 1 seed that is coveted for the bye in the NFC. But they got to have this one. Both teams are going to be coming in desperate for different reasons, given where they're at in the standings. But Zach, let's dive into some of the matchups here. And I'm curious because DeForest Buckner, he has been a Seahawks killer. Started off his career with the 49ers. Seahawks fans, I'm sure maybe still have nightmares about him. He's been on injured reserve, but the Colts opened up his practice window, the 21-day window, to come back from a neck injury. I'm curious whether you expect to see him out there this weekend, and is that the type of addition that maybe could swing things a little bit into the Colts' favor, trying to slow down Seattle's offense?
To answer that last question, maybe a little bit. We'll talk about with other matchups, though, that I don't expect this Colts defense to be too effective this weekend against Seattle's offense. 1, Seattle's offense is just outstanding, and 2, the other matchup is the Colts cornerback room is kind of a mess. But I'm not sure if we'll see DeForest Buckner this week. I will always say this with DeForest Buckner. You can never rule him out. You can never count him out. Even when he was actually officially placed on IR, I was still expecting him to show up on the fields on Sunday because he's always just been such a warrior. I mean, I don't know if I've ever seen him fully healthy in his time with the Colts since going back to 2020, but he's been out there for almost every single Sunday outside of a couple of IR stints now just to clean up some things and get healthier. So he's doing everything he can to be out there on Sunday. The Colts know they got to have at least 2 of these final 4 games if they want to make the playoffs, which is why they went out and got Phillip Rivers. Look, I can't stop talking Phillip Rivers here, but is why they went out and got him. So I would say that Buckner is going to push to play on Sunday. And typically with veterans, as long as they say they're good to go, they get the okay from teams. That's typically, in my understanding, how it works. So I can't rule it out officially. I'd say purely 50-50 right now, but if they do give it all up to Buckner, I think he would pick to play because he is just built that kind of way. And he's just such a good player. The Colts pass rush has been absolutely dreadful without him in there. They got some pressure against Atlanta prior to the bye week. But after the bye week, I mean, Pat Mahomes, the only pressures they got on him was when he ran into pressure on 3-man rush looks. And then the last 2 games against Houston and Jacksonville, just no impacting the quarterback whatsoever. Those quarterbacks had hours to throw the ball back there. So if they can even get Buckner at 20% on the field on Sunday, it would probably be better than what they've been throwing out there. So he would certainly be an upgrade for a Colts defensive line that's been in a rough place lately.
And it could just be the past track record, but seeing him out in the field, and Seattle's offensive line, quite frankly, is much better than it has been for at any point the last 7 or 8 years. So
right.
These lines are better than the ones that Buckner went against when he was in San Francisco and the last time he played them as a member of the Colts. So this is going to be an improved unit he'd be going against regardless. But as you pointed out of the corner position, that's the one that I'm watching most closely going into this game because Indianapolis went all in, and I understood it. I mean, that you didn't have your quarterback suffering an Achilles injury and all the other things that have happened. It made sense to go out and get Sauce Gardner once it became clear he was available, a top 5 corner in the league. But Sauce Gardner is dealing with a calf injury. And now Charvarius Ward, another familiar foe for the Seahawks who played a number of years in San Francisco, another concussion. He's on injured reserve, so he won't be in this game. And now you got to deal with Jackson Smith and Jigba. Cooper Kupp is playing better as of late. And oh, by the way, Rashid Shaheed just had easily his best game since Seattle traded for him. Seems like he and Darnold are starting to click. You've got to deal with those 3 down your top 2 corners. That feels like that could potentially be an insurmountable issue for Indianapolis's defense, especially given that JSN has cooked even the best corners in football this year in a number of games, including Derek Stingley, the only receiver that's made him look below average this year. I mean, he made it look like he wasn't going up against an all-pro. That does feel like that is going to be a matchup. I don't know how Indianapolis does that unless they can find a way to get a pass rush so that Sam Darnold can't get the ball downfield. But it feels like that is working strongly against Indianapolis in this one.
Yeah, I mean, if we're going to be honest about it, of the Colts' top 7 or 8 corners they had coming into training camp, only one of them is still currently healthy and on the roster, and that is Jalen Jones, who just had his worst game as a pro this past week against the Jacksonville Jaguars. So the Colts' likely starters are going to be Jones and Mekhi Blackmon. We might see, I guess, Cameron Mitchell and Jonathan Edwards rotating in there at times, but I wouldn't shock me if you guys didn't know who those names were because nobody around the league should know who those guys are at this point. Yeah, the Colts cornerback room is in dire straits right now. They came into this offseason with, Mooney Ward to be the top guy they needed on the outside. He was great when he played, but 3 concussions, and I don't think he's going to be a member of the NFL after the season, after the year that he's had with those concussions. Justin Wally, a really talented 3rd-round pick that they spent this offseason, tore his ACL in training camp. And then Sauce Gardner, the big addition they made to fix the cornerback room, is not going to play this week with that calf injury. So, of all the teams to be going against with injuries in your cornerback room, I don't know if Seattle would be high on that list of who you'd want to play. Jackson Smith and Jigba is having one of the best wide receiver seasons that we've ever seen in the NFL. Like, it's unfortunate that Puka Nacua is also having a great season, that he even has to be in like a conversation for like offensive player of the year or top receiver because he's having such a special season. So yeah, that's definitely not the guy you want. Like, even if you had Sauce and Mooney out there, he'd be a handful, right? Because he's having that great of a season, especially on the vertical plane. I don't know if I've seen many receivers just be so dominant down the field. So for the Colts, I mean, yeah, the biggest matchup is like, if you have to throw all 11 bodies on him, like, make sure somebody else beats you, because this guy has been beating everybody this year en route to having one of the greatest seasons we've seen at the wide receiver position. So try to stop Jackson Smith and Jigba, but I just don't know if they have the facilities to do that here, on defense here.
Now, I'm curious, flipping the script here, looking at the Seahawks defense, and I mentioned it early in the show, the way that they are playing right now is on par with the Legion of Boom. And they're doing things a little bit differently. The secondary is star-studded, but you don't have maybe quite the same personalities, say Richard Sherman or Earl Thomas, but they're still getting turnovers, and they've got some versatile pieces that they can move around. Nick Ebenwari, I think, deserves Defensive Rookie of the Year consideration. The guy has been incredibly disruptive in Mike McDonald's defense. He's getting better every single week. To me, if the Colts are going to have any shot to win this game, it all starts and ends with their run game, especially with the quarterback situation. And Jonathan Taylor's been as good as anybody in the NFL. The Seahawks have been as good as any team in the league at stopping the run. And I believe they are at 22 straight games without giving up a 100-yard rusher, the longest streak in the NFL. It looked like Bijan Robinson might get it last week, and then Seattle did what they seem to do. They just kind of tightened up the defense a little bit, and Kirk Cousins started throwing picks, so the game got away, and next thing you know, Robinson wasn't really a factor after that point. That's what Seattle's been able to do to a lot of teams that are good at running the football. But Jonathan Taylor behind that offensive line, Quentin Nelson going up against Leonard Williams and Byron Murphy II and Jaron Reed. That is the marquee matchup looking from Indianapolis's offensive standpoint. And if the Colts can get their ground game going, it takes a lot of pressure off of Phillip Rivers, and maybe those 5 to 10-yard completions, they can put together some drives against the Seahawks this weekend.
Yeah, I think it'll be fascinating. I'll be quick with this because I know we got to get to our final segment, but it'll be fascinating to see because a lot of their rushing offense this year, and I'm not saying they've been under center a ton this year. They've, it's still like lower, like around the middle of the pack in the NFL in terms of under center. But they've built a lot of their offense off of being under center, being heavy personnel packages, and then throwing out of those and then running against lighter boxes. With Phillip Rivers, you can't do like these long stretch runs. You're not going to do these runs that ask your quarterback to quickly take steps and get the ball to the running back, right? So in my estimation, they're going to be in shotgun a lot in this game. And how does that impact the run game? Because Seattle, even if they have a lighter box on defense, they play so hard, play so aggressive and so fast on defense that they can fit those run lanes better than anybody in the league. That's why they've been so good against the run. So, for most teams, you want to lighten the box and then run it with a Jonathan Taylor, but I just don't know how effective that's going to be against a Seattle team that just triggers so quickly on defense, especially too. Braden Smith's probably not going to play this week, the Colts right tackle. So 4th-round rookie Jalen Travis will be out there. I thought he did some decent things against the Jaguars, but this is a different animal against Seattle. Seattle's been so good on defense this year. So how does that impact things? But I'm very curious to see what the running game looks like, because I don't think they can do some of the under center stuff that they've done this year, because you just don't have a quarterback with the mobility to do that on Sunday.
That's a really good point where, you also look at the fact that Daniel Jones, you had a lot of packages in there for him to do designed runs. And you were never going to do that with Phillip Rivers at any point in his career, let alone now at the age of 44. So.
Yeah, sorry not to interrupt you, but they did a lot of bootlegs with Daniel Jones. That's where a lot of their easy buttons were on the offense to start the year. And we actually saw when the Colts offense regressed the last couple weeks, because he was playing with that fractured fibula in the left leg, they weren't doing the bootlegs as much and the offense stagnated. You can't do bootlegs with Phillip Rivers. You can try, but he's not going to move. Who's going to buy that, as a defense? So I'm very curious to see what the easy buttons are going to be for Phillip Rivers. Do they go full, empty personnel, Ken Wisenhunt type stuff, where it's just quick screens and quick slants and stuff to get the ball out and supplant the run game that way? I'm fascinated by what it's going to look like on the Colts offense this weekend.
Well, it just keeps going back to the Phillip Rivers storyline, but it's just because, I don't know. I believe I read the other day, it was Steve DeBerg in 1998 came out of retirement after several years and played at the age of 44. His team got blown out in that game. So we'll see what happens for Phillip Rivers when he tries to do this. And in defense of Phillip Rivers had a much better career than what DeBerg had. So it's not like those are comparable, but still that just makes everything about this game incredibly fascinating. So that is going to continue our discussion when we come back here. We are going to be diving into keys to victory. What do the Colts have to do to pull off what would be one of the biggest upsets of the season, given their situation right now? And what do the Seahawks have to do to just simply get the job done and keep their awesome season rolling at home, likely in torrential downpours? We'll get to that up next here. Crossover Thursday, Locked On Seahawks, Locked On Colts. Car shopping should feel exciting, not confusing. And with CarGurus, you get the confidence you deserve. They cut through all the noise so you can actually see the best deals on the cars you want, because when it comes to a big purchase, you deserve the best deal. And CarGurus makes that whole process simple by giving you real information, real deal ratings, and more listings than anyone else, so you can shop the way you want. Use CarGurus deal ratings to compare cars quickly without having to guess whether the price is fair. Their price drop alerts are a lifesaver. You get notified the second a car you're watching becomes a better deal. CarGurus connects you with trusted dealerships for a transparent and hassle-free buying process. With over 4 million listings, the most of any major online automotive marketplace, you'll always find the best deal. Shop the way you want to with the tools, data, and unbiased deal ratings that make it easy. Buy or sell your next car today at CarGurus.com. That's CarGurus.com. CarGurus.com. Guys, it's 2025, almost 2026, and those days of waiting for something to become a full-blown emergency before you see a doctor, they're now over. No more walking it off for 6 months. No more pretending that weird shoulder stiffness is just sleeping wrong. It's time to take your health seriously, and ZocDoc makes it easier than ever, because staying healthy is more than hitting the gym or eating right. It's about actually getting things checked out when something feels off. Using ZocDoc makes scheduling easier. Search for in-network doctors and book right in the app. No more back and forth phone calls or waiting weeks to be seen. It helps you stay on top of your health before something becomes a bigger problem. So stop putting off doctor's appointments and get the care you need. Go to ZocDoc.com/LockedOnNFL to find and instantly book a top-rated doctor today. That's ZocDoc.com/LockedOnNFL. ZocDoc.com/LockedOnNFL. Welcome back to Crossover Thursday, Locked On Seahawks, Locked On Colts. I'm Corbin Smith, host of the Locked On Seahawks podcast. He's Zach Hicks, host of the Locked On Colts podcast. Seattle and Indianapolis set to duke it out at Lumen Field on Sunday. And look, I can tell you this, being a resident of Indiana for 27 years, to start off my life, I know that Indianapolis natives understand the whole weather is optional in terms of forecasts. The forecast may or may not be right, but look, there's a pretty good chance it's going to be pouring on Sunday. And if you have, unless you've been under a rock in the Pacific Northwest, we've had flooding, we've had roads getting closed, mudslides, you name it. The likelihood of there being a lot of rain on Sunday is really high. So we had to keep that forecast in mind here, particularly with the Colts. Phillip Rivers, again, a quarterback I have great respect for. I think he's a Hall of Famer. Right now, he was on the semifinalist list, a chance to get into Canton that now I think gets delayed because he signed with the practice squad for the Colts. But Zach, looking at this game for Phillip Rivers, assuming that he is the guy, you've made it sound like you think that's going to be the case on Sunday. What do the Colts have to do? Let's even just, instead of just victory, what do the Colts have to do to make this game interesting enough that maybe they have a chance late to steal one in Seattle?
Man, you know it's bad when your team is picking the key matchups or whatever just to make it close on Sunday. Like, that's when you know it's bad. But I understand why you're putting that stipulation out there. I think the Seahawks, from a lot of places I've seen, are like 13.5-point favorites on Sunday.
That was the last I saw, yes.
Yeah, and that's against a team that's 8-5, mind you. So 13.5 favorites over an 8-5 team. But I completely understand it. I think, realistically speaking, when it comes to how the Colts can even make this competitive, you have to look at all the avenues that NFL teams can make upsets possible. And that is turnovers, special teams, field position. Like, those are the key elements. And that's the only way that an underdog really has a chance against a better team that should be heavily favored. So if you could win the turnover battle by 2, 3, 4 points, in this game, that can be enough to completely swing things. Special teams are huge: block kicks, big returns, things that swing momentum and swing point totals. Those are going to be massive in this one. But realistically speaking, I think the one thing I'm really looking for, and it's more so for just for the future or going forward, because this Colts core has been here since 2018, 2020, if you want to include some other players in there. And they've been a part of major meltdowns in the past. 2023, losing the final game of the season to miss the playoffs. 2021, they had a 97% chance of making the playoffs with 2 games to go. Lost both those games and missed the playoffs. 2022, we saw them just give up down the stretch last year, giving up almost 50 points to a really bad Giants team. and losing that game when they still realistically had a chance at the playoffs, or I guess statistically. This core has given up in the past. And the only way this can even somewhat work with 44-year-old Phillip Rivers is if the other 10 guys on offense and the 11 starters on defense show up and give their all. Like, look, if you get out-talented by the Seahawks this weekend, that's fine. Jackson Smith and Jigba's great. Sam Darnold's a very good quarterback. Their offensive line's really good. They're, on defense, they have dogs across the board. Really good team, right? If they beat you, they beat you. But I don't want to see them lay down and give up like they just did. I mean, look, their quarterback went down for the year. I understand it. But this past game against the Jaguars, the second Jones went down, they laid down after that game. And you got to control what you can control. Go out there and compete the best of your ability and make some plays. Again, if you lose, you lose. But I want to see them actually put up a fight in this one, not just roll over and let the Seahawks just kick them while they're down. And I don't want to see 44-year-old Phillip Rivers being the only one who gives a crap on Sunday. I think that's the biggest thing I'm looking for. And that's the biggest key for the Colts is show some fight, show some fight. Like if you don't win this one, you at least have 3 more games the rest of the year and show some fight that you're actually going to make it interesting. Don't roll over and die. But for this game to be close, it really does just come down to those typical factors we look for in upsets. Turnovers and special teams, I think, are going to be vital because if the Seahawks can just not turn the ball over and not give up big returns or have block kicks against them, I don't really know how the Colts make this a game because it's that big of a difference between these two teams right now.
Yeah, look, I look at this game, and most games, you and I we function in a similar vein. Most games, I'm really diving into the X's and O's, and I'm looking at how you can get some schematic advantages. And certainly, Mike McDonald is doing that behind the scenes defensively. He's going back and watching old Phillip Rivers tape because that's what he's got. That's what he can work with. He's looking to see if he can find someone. He and Staken were together in L.A. He's looking for all those different kinds of things right now, trying to find advantages and get, as he likes to say, chase edges. But I look at this game, particularly with the history that you just mentioned with this core of players and what happened last week. If I'm Seattle, I'm coming out and I'm putting on my boxing gloves and I'm saying, okay, the key for this game, I need to go out and throw some haymakers early. And if the Colts are anything like they have been in the past, including last week, they're going to take a few of those and they're not going to be interested anymore. And it is going to be, we're going to be able to run the football. Then we can get the play action, get some of those downfield shots. And then maybe Drew Lock gets some snaps in the second half. Like squash the bug and go after them. And you say this about any underdog, game where you're heavily favored. Like you don't want to give that team a chance to hang around because that's when they get life. And the Seahawks have been really good for the most part this year with teams that came in as underdogs, even on the road. They've done a great job of taking inferior teams and beating them up early. They did it in Washington. They did it to the Cardinals twice. They did it to New Orleans earlier this year where they just wiped the floor with a number of these teams. Minnesota, they started off slow, and then in the second half, they took over. But they have been a team that scores a lot of points in bunches. I think if you come out and physically set the tone in this game, you don't want to turn the ball over, all those things. Those are always keys. But I think in this game in particular, especially if Buckner's not playing, that's one of the guys is going to fight. If he's not out there, like I'm testing that metal and I'm saying like, okay, we're gonna bully you early and we're gonna see whether you wither up or you keep fighting back. And that is going to be very telling to me. But I think that's the biggest key for the Seahawks going into this game.
Yeah, and I will say, and you guys know this best, obviously, from what happened in your Super Bowl with Russell Wilson and throwing the interception at the 1-yard line. The one thing you never want to be is on the opposite side of a story that people tell their kids when they're older and stuff like that, right? So that one, for instance, I know that was in the Super Bowl, but everyone's going to tell their story at the last second interception. People are going to be talking for decades if somehow 44-year-old quarterback Phillip Rivers comes out here and beats arguably the best team in football out of 5 years retirement. So if you're the Seahawks, you got to come out here and show that this is more of just a WWE gimmick thing than anything else. If you're the Seahawks, like you can't let this be a real game, because that's when Lady Luck can get involved. You don't want to leave that thing up to chance. And again, the last thing you ever want to be in any sport is the team that it was against when you're telling that story, years and years down the line. I don't think you guys have to worry about that on Sunday.
We don't want this to be a Hulk Hogan versus Rocky type ordeal,
right,
where,
right.
It's an exhibition match or whatever. Like, no, that's Seattle can't approach it that way. And look, Mike McDonald, his teams have not had issues with that since he got to Seattle.
Right.
And I expect he is going to be and a lot of these guys have played against Phillip Rivers. So, Leonard Williams is going to be telling guys like, I don't care if he's 70, it's Phillip Rivers. We need to be serious. And I don't think Mike McDonald is going to let those guys come in coasting. And we'll see how the weather ends up bearing into this, because Rivers did have his issues earlier in his career, throwing in inclement weather too. So there's just all kinds of storylines off of that storyline that are going to make this a fascinating one to watch. But we'll see what everybody's talking about coming out of this game. Do the Seahawks do what they're supposed to and get it done? Or does Phillip Rivers show why he belongs in the Hall of Fame? Maybe they'll just put him in after he plays a few games with the Indianapolis Colts, coming out of retirement 5 years in and pulls off a massive upset. We'll see what ends up happening, but should be a fascinating one to watch at Lumen Field. You can follow me on X and Blue Sky at Corbin Smith NFL. You can follow Zach at Zach Hicks. 2, make sure to check out Locked On Seahawks and Locked On Colts. Both of us will have our Friday shows coming out tomorrow, getting the hay in the barn, so to speak, heading into Sunday's matchup between Seattle and Indianapolis. Thanks for listening in, and enjoy the rest of your Thursday. Go Hawks, go Colts.